Hi there all. Now for this second video, if you'd seen the first at any rate, we will be looking at the T95E6, the M60, along with the comparison to the Pattern 3. We will look at them all respectively inside of Tanks GG, looking at the stats so you'll get a good feel of how they shore up against their counterparts, and then in turn taking these vehicles inside of a trading room so you can get an even further look at how they will perform. That way it's not merely a here's the stats, it's within a physical in-game setting you can see how they perform, which I believe will give everyone a much better view of what tank they should pick, or at the very least give you a bit more information to better inform you on which one of your Clan Wars reward tanks you will be picking come this round, since I'd stated in the first video we've got a fair number of them at 5. So without further ado, let's pop right in the Tanks GG and have a look at both of these US T10 reward tanks and how they stack up. In Tanks GG, here we have the M60, the Pattern 3, the T95E6, and one addition I decided to make, the Centurion Action X, because I believe a lot of you watching most likely have not played any of these three American tanks, especially the Pattern 3, since it's perceived as a not as competitive Tier 10 medium, which is rather unfortunate. But the Action X I add, not just because more people have played it, but because, with the exception of the turret armor and layout, its in playstyle is a decent in-tech tree analog to what we will be looking at here. So, off the bat, DPM, just under 2800, which is ever so slightly less than the Action X, much less, well not much less, but notably less than the Pattern 3. This is for two reasons. One, when you look at a Russian med, you do have that 3000 DPM, but it's on a 320 Alpha gun. With the M60 and the 95E6, you have a 390 and 400 Alpha gun respectively, which affords you the ability to peek and poke or make better trades versus other mediums with a smaller 90mm gun doing 320 Alpha damage. Now, one other thing you will notice here, 268 pen, the 95E6 has a 258 pen gun with a 400 Alpha. Now that may spark in your mind, from a lot of you, is sounding familiar to another tank. And you would be correct, because that would be the the T125 having a similar gun, if not outright the same as far as the game is concerned, not historically mind you, as the T95E6. And you have the gun handling in turn, as we will see shortly. Going also into the shell velocity, since you have an AP round instead of APCR, it's a slightly slower shell velocity on the 95E6 as compared to its brethren. It's really not as bad as it would seem. You can still snipe at range rather easily. You just have to lead obviously a bit more than you would a Russian medium or the M60 or any of the other Tier 10 mediums in this case that we're looking at. Aim time. Very good on the M60, 1.73, 1.92 on the 95E6, which, if you will remember back on the first part of these series of videos, is the same as the Object 907, so that 1.92 is not bad at all. It is still very good. 0.36 accuracy on the 95E6, it's the worst out of the lot, but it's still only 0.01 worse than a Russian med. But the M60 still has the lead on it at 0.34. But the dispersion is what sets the M60 vastly apart from the 95E6. The 95E6 is rocking 0.16. Now, you may also remember that I had mentioned that my irksome 210 medium was the STB1. Guess what it had? 0.16 dispersion. You do not snapshot nearly as reliably as you will in a Russian medium, or in this case, the M60, which has excellent gun handling on it, along with the Pattern 3, so you will have to, in some instances, let that gun aim hidden, which can be a problem. Not a pronounced one, but enough that I would want to mention it to all of you. And then we look at the one thing that I ever so love about most tanks with good gun depression. 8 degrees is very good, 9 and 10 is excellent gun depression. You can play on variable terrain and just peek and shoot and pull back and only expose your turret to your heart's content. But with these tanks, it can be somewhat problematic, which is why I had mentioned initially the Centurion Action X plays the same, except for the fact that it has a better turret than the other three, which we will look at in length. One other problem. Everything up until now has been exceptional on these tanks. Good alpha, decent DPM, and good shell velocity, good gun depression, good gun handling. But we have a top speed of 48 on the M60 and a rather poor power to weight ratio on the T95E6. That 56 kph top speed on the T95E6 is a bit misleading, because with a 14 to 1 horsepower per ton on a flat surface, this M60 is going to be beating you and getting up to 48 well before you will, if you ever even get to that on a flat surface. Let alone uphill, the M60 is going to be laughing at a T95E6 behind it. But with that said, 48 is a bit low if you're taking initial positions. I personally prefer a vehicle with 55 kph or higher, so you're not caught out in the open, exposed as long, and you will be getting to positions a bit late with this top speed when you consider that most tier 10 mediums have a good 16 horsepower per ton or more with a 55 to 65 kph speed. So if you're taking early positions, aggressively I should add, just bear in mind what the enemy comp is and play accordingly. You have good terrain resistance on both the M60 and the 95E6, they're better than the Pattern 3, and ever so slightly worse than the Action X, but it effectively has Russian medium terrain resistance, so with that in mind, you've still got very good terrain resistance, so still incredibly mobile, just gimped a bit in that top speed on the M60 and the ability to take hills in the 95E6. Now, the turret traverse and the track traverse, very good for tier 10 meds. 95E6 a bit slower with 37, but enough to where it's not going to be causing you problems. And then, coming down and looking at the armor. This armor is garbage. Well, I shouldn't laugh, it's unfortunate. And the 114 on the 95E6 is thoroughly bad as well. The 114 wouldn't be as bad if it was sloped back at say 50 to 60 degrees, but it's not sloped as much as you would need. The turret armor at 177, once again, as with the whole armor, it's really not all that sloped. Things will pen straight through you. And the 95E6 has this leg up with very good turret armor, 342mm, but you have a glaring weak spot on it that it shares with the M60 and the Pattern 3. which nearly mitigates that armour altogether. Now the view range. The view range is lovely. 420 meters on the M60, 410 on the 95E6. This is better than a tier 10 Russian med at 400. Now, this is good for two reasons. One, just the fact that you've got outright better view range, and two, you may consider putting vents on instead of coated optics. Now this will do two things. One, it'll bring your view range up to being close to what it would be on a Russian medium with coated optics, because that'll put it up to 400. You'll be 430 plus, and at the same time it will give you better gun handling and better DBM, which I'm not necessarily advocating you do that, but it is certainly an option. Always having over that 445 cap with coated optics, 420 meter view range, you will eat through camo coefficient, which is usually what you want to stress, because your camo coefficient on these tanks isn't the best out of a tier 10 medium, so stressing the view range is usually the better bet. Now the fire trans M60, I don't think I've ever been caught on fire, especially when being shot in the engine. Now the 95E6, I have admittedly run it a bit less than the M60, and I have also had the engine knocked out. Now that's not to say it's going to be a constant problem, but it will be more of a problem than it is with the M60. Now what I want to address is coming here and looking at the Armour model. Your hull armour, as stated, is incredibly thin. Even at a severe angle, it's not a ricochet, and you will go through. The turret, nearly all of it, with the exception of one bit, is incredibly thin. Now you've got this mantlet that is exceptionally thick with 2 layers of spaced armour, but it does not encompass very much of the front of the turret. Perhaps at range, if someone's shooting you, it may eat a shot, but anyone that knows this tank or the Pattern 3 will be shooting anywhere but the mantlet. And other than this, what is the first thing all of you notice, aside from this goofy lamp on the front? It's this huge tumor. Now, I mention this because one, it's a weak spot, and obviously if they miss this, they're going to hit the tumor, or they're just going to outright be aiming at it. But the T95E6 shares the exact same problem. A huge weak spot on the top of it, which is rather unfortunate because you've got armour on top of the turret, which has an incredibly good slope, as evident by looking at the side of it, but you have very good armour on the entirety of the rest of the turret. So it pains me to see this, but there is one thing you can do when we come here and look at the visual model. You get that gun down, you use your gun depression, try and get on a nice bit of terrain. Good lord, it's going wonky on me. And you make that a slightly smaller target. Actually a fair bit smaller, because this is a weak spot as well. The part right underneath the tumor. So you take that out of the way and you make that a smaller target. So if you can use the gun depression on this, I highly advise you do so. And the M60 is the exact same thing. You just get that gun down of yours, get on some variable terrain, and try and make this as small a target as you possibly can. Because if they're aiming up into you, hopefully they're either going to hit this, slightly below, ricochet off, but you must keep this in mind. Now let's go ahead and look at both the M60 and the T95E6 inside of the training room, so you can get a bit more of a visual aid as well as seeing all of these stats in practice. Alrighty, first up we've got the M60 on the right and the Pattern 3 on the left, looking at the hull traverse. And if you will remember, the M60 had a 2-degree better per second hull traverse than the Pattern 3. It's a bit tighter turn, quicker turn, but not enough to really be a true selling point for the vehicle. Next up, after I do a little bit of an angling on the speed, since we have a bit of a mishap on the start here, the M60 has just about the same power to weight as the Pattern 3, and speeding up, catching even, not really getting past the Pattern 3, but after downhill, catching up to that 48 top speed on the M60, but it's only 3 more than the Pattern 3, so unless you're going downhill, it isn't really going to make all that much of a difference. It's still nice, but not a, I always say a selling point, but it's just a nicety. It's not something you'll go out of your way to get the tank for. Now if it went 55, that would be another thing altogether. So first up, popping into the side of the turret, bullet will do the same to us. Right off on the right cheek and going clean through. This is with standard ammo on both parties. And next up we are going to aim, I believe, at the hull, since, well, there's really nothing there, so I suppose there's not much point in doing this at all, but just to show that you're going to go clean through every time. Ideally I should have been angling the tank to stress this even more, but you've got sub 130mm armor at a negligible slope compared to a Russian made, so just to say it's not the best thing or reliable by any stretch. So this shot going into the mantlet. This entire thing, no better yet, we'll zoom out, look at this. It does encompass, I shouldn't have fired. Encompasses, dear Lord Bullet, why'd you fire? Encompasses, for the third time now, a fair portion of the front of the turret. At range, it may eat shots. Up close, nobody's going to be intentionally shooting that. It's maybe going to get you a saving throw once every few battles. So, overall, it's very much a premium version, not credit earning, just to the crew wise, of the Pattern 3 overall. So if you enjoy that Pattern 3 or the T9 Pattern, the M60 you will by all rights have a fun time with. Now let's go ahead and have a look at the other T10, the T95E6. And here we have the 95E6 on the right, and once again the Pattern 3 on its opposite side. Doing the whole traverse first, getting a bit of a difference on lead, but turning at essentially the same rate. So that's a good start. But now here's the one thing I wanted to stress the most in this trading room. If we could both manage to get in a position and time things correctly, edging forwards. The acceleration is fairly poor on the 95E6. Even with a head start, the Pattern 3 is clearly pulling ahead of us, and the 95E6 is supposed to have a higher top speed, but as I'd said, it takes GG. You're just really not gonna get that, and it sucks to see. Now, going on to the Armour Model, which is the other thing I wanted to show here. Bullet in the Pattern 3 is going to shoot us in the thick bits of the turret, right on the cheeks to the left and right hand side. First, starting with what seems to be the viewport on the left. That is actually not a weak spot, as you will see. Bouncing clean off. Matter of fact, even right where the viewport is, just skirting the inside of it. That's over 300mm thick. So, as I'd said, it's got a good turret, And now going to the right side and doing the same, aiming at the cheek just to the left of the viewport and mounting off once again. But unfortunately, even though you have this wonderful turret on either side and up top, you've got this tumor. So yes, bullet just bounced off the left hand side, the right hand side, and the very top of the turret, but you've got this big ungainly thing. Though, with being zoomed in like this section isn't physically represented on the model. Visually, yes, but the Armour Model, no. You can shoot at this, you will hit nothing. It will go clean through, and I think bullet just shot us in the upper plate. No, he didn't, he just shot us in the tumor as I was talking about it. And on the nose of the tumor, as you'll see him shoot right after this, I believe, this shot, rather, the flat bit under the tumor, that's actually a weak spot as well. And I want to see if he's actually aiming at that, because I do believe that is the last shot he is going to be directed to make here. But overall, same weak hole, very good turret, but you've still got this glaring weak spot on top of it. So as he sits here and continues to shoot me, I wanted to do a bit of a summarization. I didn't do that with the 97 video, bearing in mind I was going to pass these videos up. Out of the selection, the M60&T95E6, if you're looking at a bit more mobile, of the two of these, the 95 and the M60, your best bet is to go with the M60. If you want to stress gun handling, again, M60. The only true leg up this 95E6 has over the M60 is this wonky turret having actually good armor on it, but you still got the tumor, and then you've got what is essentially the E5's gun, the T110E5, with the gun handling in tow. So you've got higher alpha, but you take a hit in the gun handling. I don't like the 95E6 as much as the M60, but I still wanted to put it forth because it does have some niche abilities over the M60. But with that said, hopefully you all found this somewhat, I want to say, to your liking. I know a lot of individuals, American tanks aren't really the thing, but I still believe that the M60 is a very fun tank, as is the 95E6. It just happens that we've got all these other Clan Wars reward tanks that is so much better as a selection of playstyles. Meanwhile, you got the 95E6, which is in some respects a one-trick pony, but it's still fun. Wanted to show all of you it's all the same, and we will continue after this video looking at the 7201 against the E100 and the WZ121B against, well, nothing, because the only in-game analog is the WZ121, and I don't have a crew in that, and I don't care for that tank personally, but I'm going to leave that bias aside once we get into that video. At any rate, I have been Starshield. I hope you all have found this informative, if not entertaining, and I will catch you on the next video. So you all do take care in the meantime.